Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'll be showing you how to model a rocket ship. We'll be just going over some basic modeling, inner extrude, regular extrusion, and loop cuts. We're going to be using a capsule for the main rocket ship body. So go to Primitives, go to Capsule, and make sure your lines are on NB on your keyboard. We're going to go into Z orientation. And we're going to make this about 8 segments, 8 rotation segments. Cap segments will go 3. And let's stretch this out. Let's make this a little bit longer. And a little bit, let's bring that to there. And about 6 height segments is fine. Okay, let's make this editable. Go to Live Selection and go to Polygon mode. And we're going to delete these polygons to get rid of that pole. And optimize to remove that one point. So go to rectangle selection, and we're going to choose this row of points. So make sure you have only select visible elements unchecked and tolerance selection checked. And we're going to select these points. We're just going to make this a little bit larger. And this will serve as our cockpit. So we can kind of shape this a little bit. First, what I want to do is before I start shaping this cockpit, what I want to do is I want to kind of make a point with our the main part of the front of our rocket ship. So what I want to do is I want to close this polygon hole. So I'm going to go MD on the keyboard, close that, and I want to go to knife tool, so KK, and I just want to make lines and make sure I have quads here. Select these polygons, and then what I want to do is I want to go inner extrude, pull this out a bit, and then D on your keyboard for extrusion. Make sure create caps is unchecked. Pull this out, and we're going to resize this to a point. Okay. Next, go to line mode, and what I want to do is I just want to select this loop using loop selection, UL on your keyboard. And I just want to bring this out a bit, and same with this one. So in order to get a better idea of how our model is shaping, we definitely want to put it into a subdivision surface. So I'm going to rename this rocket ship. And in fact, I want to make a null as well. Put our main geometry into the null, And then we're going to make a subdivision surface. We'll put the whole null into a subdivision surface. And you can rename this rocket ship sub D. And this way we can kind of get an idea while we're modeling how our geometry is going to be affected when we have it in a subdivision surface. So from here, what I want to do is I just want to shape the main nose of this a little bit better. And you can pull this out and make this a little bit pointier. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go to polygon mode, and we wanted to create sort of a glass bubble for our cockpit. So I'm going to extrude. Let's go to point mode. What I want to do is I want to start shaping this a little bit better. And so we can do that by just resizing these points. And so what we're doing is we're just kind of shaping this cockpit a little bit better, so it's a little bit more aerodynamic. So grab these points and just kind of shape it into a more of a round bubble. We can pull these in. I'm going to pull this one back a little bit. Pull this down. And these guys are sticking out a little bit, so I just want to pull that in a little bit. And I want to pull this one forward to maybe about here. And always go back and forth between your subdivision surface and see how that looks. Looks pretty good, but what I want to do is I want to go to polygon mode, UL for loop selection, and select these two rows of polygons, these two loops. I just want to transform, and I just, in this axis, just want to pull it out a little bit. Maybe squish it down a tad. And just kind of shape this a little bit. Okay, let's move on to the rocket tail. And same as the front, I'm just going to select these polygons, delete. Let's clean up that one point, so we'll optimize. Make sure your no other points are selected. Optimize. And MD on the keyboard. Close polygon hole. And in knife, we'll make a cut here and here. Select these polygons and we'll make an inner extrusion, pull this out, make another extrusion here, and one more. And we're going to resize this for our rocket tail. MO on the keyboard is going to bring up, excuse me, UL is going to select these edges, and MO on the keyboard is going to bring up our edge slide. And what I want to do is I want to hold down Command and then Shift. Let me pull this out a little bit. And I want to select these polygons, inner extrude, and then I want to extrude inwards. T on your keyboard to resize. Let's pull this one in a little bit. And I want to do another inner extrude. And go to KL for loop cut. I just want to put a cut here and here. And I would also want to put a cut here and here. Let's take a look at subdivision surface, see how that's looking. Looks good. And it's starting to take a little bit of shape. What I want to do is I want to put a wing on this side, but I'm going to have a fuel tanks that will be on each side of our rocket ship and right above it. So in order to do that, I want to have a symmetry object. And within that symmetry, I want to have a null, and we're just going to name this wing. And I'm going to put wing underneath symmetry. And now I'm going to make a capsule. Make that in the +Z. And I'm going to pull this into position. I'm going to name this fuel tank. And put this in the wing null. Let's resize this. Now I don't need this much geometry because I'll be putting in this in the sub D. So what I want to do is I want to make this about 8 rotation segments, a 3 cap, and let's see, maybe 4 height segments. Okay, I want to put this into our rocket ship. And I just want to tighten this up a little bit. Okay. Now I want to make a wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Cube. Rename this wing. resize this before I make it editable. So just gonna put this into place and just size it a little bit. A little too thick, so I just want to make that a little thinner, a little shorter. Put this into our wing. Let me turn off subdivision surface for a minute. I want to make this editable. Let's go to point mode, and what I want to do is select this. I want to pull this back to about here, and we're going to have a rocket rocket right on the wing. So we're going to have to shape this a little bit more after we put that on. But for now, let me select these 2 points, T on your keyboard, and we're just going to taper this a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with these front points. Kind of taper that down a bit. Okay, next, what I want to do is I want to make some cuts. So let's go to line mode, KL to bring up loop cuts. And I just want to put one here. Put one here. I want to put one right in the middle. Also want to put one right over here and on this edge as well. So when we put the subdivision surface on, that wing is nice and defined. So we'll make our rocket on the wing. So I'm going to go to capsule. Now for this one, what I want to do is I want to make similar segments 8, 3, and let's resize this. Definitely not this tall. And let's hide our main rocket for a moment. Rename this wing rocket, and I feel it's a little too thick. And let's make this a bit shorter. I think the segments are okay. Before I put into position, I want to put on a deformer. I want to taper this. I'm going to put this underneath our wing rocket and make it fit the parent. We'll up the strength. And let me zoom in a little bit. Get that into a nice point. I'm going to pull this into our wing. And you can see the subdivision surface, how it smooths everything out. Okay, maybe it's a little too much. You can back it off a bit. Now what I want to do is I want to rotate this around to 90 degrees, If you hold down Shift, you can move in 10-degree segments. And let's pull this into position. And you can see what I mean by we'll have to resize the wing a little bit so it connects. And I want to pull this back a tad. Okay, and let's go back to the wing real quick. I just want to pull this in a bit. So I'm going to grab rectangle selection. Let's turn off sub D so I can see the points better. So I'm going to select all this cluster of points. And I just want to pull this right to it, and let me turn on subdivision surface so I can prefer not to have any main gaps. Let's take a look at the back end as well. I think we're all right. Okay, now that we have the rocket wing, what I want to do is I want to turn off our subdivision surface. I want to select the taper and the wing rocket. I'm going to right click, connect objects plus delete. I want to go to polygon mode. Let's go to live selection. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the main rocket tail. And let me bring that back up. I want to do something very similar. So I want to select these polygons. And I can do an inner extrude. Pull this out. Do another extrusion. And let's pull this in. And then do another extrusion. And let me zoom out so I can see our main rocket body just for reference. And I'll pull this out, extrude a little, or resize a little bit. I want to do inner extrusion. Pull this out a bit. Do another inner extrusion. Pull this in. And then a regular extrusion, but we're going to go towards the inside. And in fact, let me just make another extrusion so we have that loop. That'll help us when we subdivide. I'm going to do that again. And then another inner extrusion. So that way we don't have to go back and make loop cuts. Let's take a look at subdivision surface. And you can see that smooths over really nicely. I do want to make two more cuts here. So KL, make a cut here and here. Define that edge a little bit better. Okay, let me go to subdivision surface. And I do see a gap here in the wing. So I want to select the wing rocket and wing. And in our directional tool, I just want to bump this over a little bit. Just so there isn't a gap. Okay. That's looking fine. So we're moving along. Let's make another fuel tank. So I'm going to command click and drag out of the symmetry. And I want to go to coordinates, and I'll zero this out. Oops. I'm sorry. Try that again. Zero this out in the X. And I want to pull this up to about here. And I'm going to put in some support beams. So I'm going to pull that up around there. And what I want to do is I want to make some support beams. So I'm going to go to cube. And I want to resize this. Pull this closer a little bit. So the support beams are wrapped around the outside of our main rocket ship, excuse me. And I just want to pull this down a little bit. Make this editable. Grab these points, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into a symmetry object. First, let me resize this a bit. And in fact, I want to select these points on the outside and just resize them in this axis. So they're a bit outside of our rocket body. I feel like it's a little bit thick. So I'm going to select these points. And I want to hide a few things so I can see these points. I just want to pull this back just a tad. I feel like it'd be a little bit thinner. Okay, so now I want to go to our polygon mode, and I want to select the front and back. And I'm going to do an inner extrude. Pull this in. Doesn't have to be too thick. I want to delete. I want to select these polygons, delete. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to go to bridge. And make sure I'm in line mode. We'll just bridge these polygons. Oops. Okay. Okay, we're looking good. So next what I want to do is I want to just take this side and rotate so it's a bit flatter. I want to go to line mode, KL, just want to use this slider. I just want to go to 50%. And I'm just going to name this support beams. Now what I want to do is I want to select these polygons. On the side here. And I'm just going to delete. Point mode. Optimize. I just want to put this in a symmetry object. Select these points and bring these down a bit. Make another cut. Let's go line mode, UL on your keyboard, and let me straighten this line out. If you hold down shift, you can get down to 0. And in your directional tool, I just want to pull this down. The idea here is to just shape this to the curvature of our fuel tank. And maybe nudge this over a little bit. Okay, everything is looking good, but now I want to go to our wing and our rocket ship. Let me hide the wing for a second because I want to shape this a little bit better. So I want to go to KL and I want to make a few cuts. Let's see if I can move these a little bit. And again, it's just shaping this support beam to go around our rocket body. And I want to select this bottom one, bottom loop, and I just want to pull this in slightly. Keep in mind this is going to be in a subdivision surface, so we can kind of take a look at how it's shaping. I'm going to put in some cuts so we define our edge a little bit better. Make sure this is in our rocket ship null. So we can kind of see how that smooths out. And we might need to do some fine tuning. Okay, so now we have that. I'm going to make that editable. So now we have a full geometry which to work with. I'm going to hide our subdivision surface. KL. Make loops cuts here. Here. And we're also going to put one here. Hide this for a second, and I want to put another one here. And so we have our support beams. So we have one in the front. Let's pull this, excuse me, we have one in the back. Let's pull this one into the front. And you can name these if you want. I'm just going to name this support beam F. And this is the rear. So support beams R. And I like to have the front on top. Okay, so next, let's take a look at our wing. See how we're looking here. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape. We have our main rocket ship body, we have the fuel tanks, and we have our wing rockets. But let's put in some fuel lines to go from our tanks into our main rocket engine. So what I want to do is simply go to our pen tool, and we're going to do a Bezier line. So I'm going to go to our side view, and I like working on the left side, so I'm just going to go to our options, our camera, and we'll go to left view. I just want to zoom in a bit. And I want to make a line that comes from our fuel tank from the top right down into here, into this section here. So I'm going to make a point and then say about right here. Make another point and then one more point just a bit below our geometry here. In the same spline area, I want to go to circle. And in object tab, what I want to do is I want to go radius 1. It's probably way too big, but just for now, we'll go to 1. And then we'll go to sweep. We'll go to spline. Oh, we'll select our spline and our circle, put that under our sweep generator. And let's go to perspective mode and see how we're looking here. Okay, we're looking good except the fact that we're in the wrong orientation. So let's go to sweep, objects, and I believe it's in our circle. So let's go through a few of these to see, okay, it's the XY plane. And like I said, it's a little too thick. So what we can do is we can go to our circle, object radius, and holding down option, we get smaller increments. Let's go to 0.5 and see how that looks. I think that's fine. Now I want some type of connector from the tank, the fuel tank, to our main rocket. So there's a couple different ways. I mean, you could use a sphere and then go to like maybe a hexahedron and then like maybe cut this point. If you make it editable, you could select all of these polygons and then delete and then rotate that around. But I think what I'm going to do is use a tube, and we know that the radius is 0.5, so I'll go to 0.5 for inner radius, and our outer radius for now, let's go to 1, and we know the height's way too big, so let's go to, I don't know, 3 for now, and just put it into position. And we know we're on the Z axis, so let's go to Z. And I'm just gonna pull this forward so we're into position. And we're a little bit off here, so let me center this up. And it's a little too big. Oops. Pull this back. And I want to put a fillet cap on it so it kind of rounds that edge a little bit. And just want to maybe just kind of eyeball this. Just kind of get it centered. Now let's make another one for the other end. And I'm going to pull this. And I can rotate this around. I can go into the plus Y. Pull this down. And get this also into position. Just kind of eyeball getting this centered. Alright, looking good. Let me pull this back a little bit maybe. Now what I want to do is I want to select all this. And I just want to Option G to make a null. And what I want to do is I want to call this fuel lines. And I'm going to Command copy. And I could probably put this in a symmetry so I can rotate this around to 90 degrees. Pull this into the symmetry in our wing. And let me pull this out. So we're not exactly the same as our, in terms of distance, as the one that we made earlier. So that's not a problem. What we can do is maybe pull this into place for our connector from the fuel tank and just kind of center that up. And if I select the spline that's for our wing, and then go to our rectangle selection, make sure we're in point mode, we'll select that point, we're just going to drag this in. Gonna have to get the connector too. And just make sure that's in our geometry, intersecting our geometry. Now we have our tube. Now that's the one for our fuel tank. And just kind of get that into position as well. That way we'll use our symmetry to help us out a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. We have, you know, very quickly you can kind of build this rocket ship. You could spend a little bit more time on the wing, maybe even adding in a fin. There's a few little adjustments that, you know, we can make. You know, maybe make a ridge on, if we go to our main rocket body, hide our subdivision surface, you can throw in some details. Let's go to UL, or excuse me, let's go to KL and bring up our knife selection, or our knife cuts. And you can put in a few cuts. And then maybe if you go to polygon mode, you can go to UL, select this loop, these two loops, extrude, make an extrusion, and kind of give it some ridges on that. And do the same thing to our wing rocket. and put a few ridges here as well. There's also one other thing I want to do, and I'll just extrude this out. See how that looks? There's one other thing I want to do on our main rocket ship. If I go to KL, I want to put a cut here. And what I want to do is I want to make an extrusion, or a UL to make a loop selection. I want to make an extrusion 1, and let's make another one here. Let's take a look at our subdivision surface. I want to see more of a definition between a rocket body and our cockpit glass bubble. So if I turn off lines NA on our keyboard, and let's unselect our rocket ship, you can kind of see, if I do a little render here, you can kind of see a bit of a ridge here for our little definition between our rocket ship and the bubble, our glass, our cockpit glass. One thing, there is a bit of jagged edges for our geometry, and we can up our subdivisions in both the editor and the render. So if that will help out, a little slower in terms of render time, but you'll have a lot smoother look. So I zoom around here and let me pan out, take a look at everything. We have all our connections, our support beams. Take a look from the top. Get into the practice of taking a look at your model from all angles. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.